Hello, I'm Bry Willis, a language philosopher by inclination and a recovering everything else by accident. This is my third attempt to record this owing to technical challenges. If I happen to be wearing headphones in any edits, you'll know why. Hoping third time's a charm. Let's crack on. Philosophics.blog is where I house a portion of my work, the bits that survive, the gauntlet of scrutiny, insomnia, and typographic fussiness. People have asked to see me and hear me instead of the Notebook LM or 11 Labs apparition, so here we are. Let's pretend this is a good idea. I've released my past in fragments over the years, usually because someone pried too hard. In concise form, I've had rather too many careers. My first obsessions were language, linguistics, and music. Voracious reader, obsessive musician, the usual childhood foretastes of intellectual ruin. I never pursued linguistics professionally. The wages were insulting even for a starving artist, which I was for long enough that the distinction became moot. My early adulthood was spent in Los Angeles during the hair metal haze in the 1984 Olympics, working as a recording engineer, producer, and musician. Later, I studied business, finance, and economics, eventually teaching undergraduate economics, if only one ignores strict chronology. I've often wondered whether I should have simply read philosophy at university, but attempting to double major already consumed every elective I could wrestle from the administration. From there, I wandered in statistics, asset pricing models, and then directly into the third wave of AI, expert systems, and other earnest attempts at artificial intelligence, back when it still felt slightly magical. Programming followed, business analysis followed that, strategy consultant followed. And because nothing says career drift like advising CEOs whose books you'd rather be burning, I ultimately left and all roads led back to here. I'm an introvert by design, not diagnosis. I function well enough around people, but I prefer some distance, and I'm increasingly selective about company. These days, I'm at home nearly 24/7. Aside from eating and sleeping, two obligations I'd happily outsource, I read, write, watch far too much YouTube, and distill all of it into new work. I've seen enough of the outside world to know the marginal returns have tapered off. I write both fiction and nonfiction. The fiction lives elsewhere, a separate property with its own atmosphere. Writing clears the mental detritus, but it also sparks new ideas. Reading does the same. When I encounter a book or paper A, my brain immediately connects it to B, C, D, and any orphan concepts along the way. The usual suspects: language, linguistics, philosophy, economics, politics. And for the past 3 years, I've been working with the fourth wave of AI, the generative era, mostly GPTs. I suspect the bubble will burst and cheap access will vanish, but perhaps I'll be pleasantly mistaken. For now, it's a lost leader gold rush, everyone racing to capture a market whilst praying for efficiency breakthroughs. None of that's about me, but I'm an involuntary participant in the experiment. And let's talk about how I use AI these days. I've created a few GPTs, but usually I'm merely a user. In the old days, I would just read and read. If I had an idea, I'd Google. Once Google had been invented, I remember a time before Alta Vista, and now I have the LLMs. Here's my workflow. When I get an idea, whether for fiction or nonfiction, I commence a dialogue with the GPT. ChatGPT is my go-to, but I also use Claude, Perplexity, Gemini, DeepSeek, Mistral, and very infrequently Meta Llama, definitely the weakest gazelle in that herd, for my use cases, which are generally 4. So firstly, I ask if my concept is unique. If not, we'll chat to find a unique angle that conforms to my worldview, or I'll abandon or at least shelf an idea. In either case, we'll chat for hours as I gather more input and look for more connections and a sharper core thesis to synthesize. Secondly, I ask who else has occupied this space, and I request references. Of course, this will lead to more discussion. I usually try to track down the source material and at least scan it. I'll either ask the GPT to summarize it, or after I've read it, I share my interpretation with the GPT for confirmation or to fill in missing pieces. This is its own subroutine. I'll spare you the details. So thirdly, If I decide to pursue something, I'll continue to solicit feedback. Usually, as I write, another connection or two or whatever comes to me. So I'll ask the GPT if the connections make sense. This may lead to another branch of related inquiry, or it may lead to a separate project. Finally, I use the GPTs to review my work. For nonfiction, I lean on it as a peer reviewer. For fiction, it's more like a beta reader or perhaps some development or copy editing. As an ancillary, I prompt the GPTs for ideas for SEO tags and keywords, social media sharing ideas, cover art prompts for blog posts. Of course, most of my covers are generated by Midjourney. A few are rendered by DALL-E or something else if they weren't scavenged on the internet. In some cases, I'll even create something myself in Photoshop or Illustrator. I may even use these to touch up a rendered image, but I usually just post what I get, even if it's not quite what I wanted, if only to shame the AI. Most of my present time is absorbed by the Anti-Enlightenment Project, where I dismantle the Enlightenment's cozy myths, reason, objectivity, agency, the whole self-congratulatory shebang, along with their institutional offspring of capitalism, democracy, and sordid moral pageants. I oppose some of these structures on principle. Others simply don't work even on paper. But this isn't a sermon. Anyone with minimal critical capacity can spot the cracks. Alongside that, I'm juggling several tangential projects. My fiction manuscripts have been politely gathering dust whilst I finish indexing the language insufficiency hypothesis, which I hope to publish in early 2026. There is also a nearly complete manuscript diagnosing democracy's foundational problems, none of which involve politicians, the favorite scapegoats of the civically fatigued. I intend to share more content through podcasts and videos, though this is a zero-sum world with opportunity cost, a problem for economically challenged individuals. Time spent performing is time stolen from writing and research. Still, occasionally I step outside my preferred shadows, as I am now, to connect beyond the page. Consider this one of those rare incursions. If you made it this far, congratulations, but there are no prizes. Depending on where you are hearing this, watching this, reading this, you can find me under Philosophics on YouTube, Spotify, and of course, Philosophics.blog. My fictional self is available at ridleypark.blog as a gateway. Anyway, until next time, cheers.